Before I get into today's video, I just wanted to give a very heartfelt thanks to everybody who's discovering this channel for the first time. You might be a little bit confused if you start going through the backlog of this channel. This channel was kind of started with some very different intentions when it was first created, and truth be told, I actually technically do not own this channel. I'm in the middle of trying to negotiate something to get it fully in my control. I deleted a lot of the old videos and I privated a lot of the other ones because I don't want to really have anything to do with that old drama content that used to go up on this channel. And frankly, I don't really care very much about video games anymore, so I kind of stopped doing that as well. But this is all just to say, to kind of reiterate what I put in the pinned comment on the Invincible video, which the link to that is in the description if you care to go see that to kind of get an idea of what you're getting into with this channel. I just really appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody who's positive. I appreciate everybody who is negative. Every feedback you give me, every comment, every recommendation, I do take to heart, and I do really read, and I do really go through. I do my best to respond to comments, and I'm just ecstatic to see people responding to my style of content and my style of writing. Like I said in the comment, I'm not very confident in my writing, but yeah, keep an eye out on this channel. I'm gonna try to be more consistent with uploads. I have some more scripts in the soup mix, if you will. And like I also said in that comment, I am also going to try launching a podcast here fairly soon, but I'm really trying not to do the whole like yet another white dude with a podcast mic who talks about just a bunch of bullshit all the time. It's going to be all dominantly about filmmaking because that's my personal career outside of this channel, and it's going to be pretty much all about reviews and essays and analysis and long form conversation with other filmmakers. So if that sounds interesting to you and if you really like my content, keep an eye out for it. I'll keep you updated, but in the meantime, thank you again, and let's get into the video.
Wow. He's looking for the exit.
No, just, so the hope was for Bert's innie to go to heaven.
Yes.
The work is mysterious and important.
By now, you probably fall into one of three camps when it comes to humanity's newest creative fascination, Severance. You either A, are annoyed at all the discourse and feel that people are hyping up yet another classic example of a streamer bias. B, you know what the discourse is about, but the show never quite resonated with you to the degree that other people seem to have felt. Or C, you are well familiar with the discourse, you take part in it and revel in the series' phenomenal sense of mystery, structure, and wholly unique thrills. Now surely when you look at the numbers, the viewership, and the budget, you'd label Severance as the next Stranger Things, the next Game of Thrones, or hell, my personal favorite show of all time, the next X-Files. There's a boatload of comparative projects you can really toss at Severance in an attempt to make your point more valid, and hell, you'd be mostly right 99% of the time. But what if I told you that out of all the phenomenal essays on this series, of which there are several, all the thoughtful breakdowns, all the socially incredible deep dives into the bowels of Lumon aren't really getting at what I believe is Severance's biggest strength.
Just relax your body and be open to the facts. Try to enjoy each equally.
Severance is what I refer to as a soft sci-fi. A drama, to be certain, and at times even a wacky comedy. But what if I told you it's all of those things, but mostly it's a horror show?
Hi there. You on the table? I wonder if you'd mind taking a brief survey.
Who is that?
5 questions. Now, I know you're sleepy, but I just bet it'll make you feel right as rain.
Severance has one of the strongest opening episodes in a TV/streaming series since ever, frankly. But were I to make a direct comparison, possibly the strongest since Breaking Bad. Yes, I realize that's a bold claim to make. Breaking Bad sits on this megalithic pedestal of which we believe nothing can ever come close. And while sure, it's about entirely different subject matter, the way that it's crafted, the production value, the acting, the music, everything comes together in a form so comprehensively unique and whole and structurally sound. I feel it is the most powerful opening since Breaking Bad. Now, right off the bat, we're introduced to the character of Mark Scout, a man clearly bedeviled by invisible images of a trauma that we aren't privy to. A man clearly motivated by a desire to forget and a desire to be alone. Now perhaps it's not an intimate desire, but more of a direct need. Now what makes this such an effective and strong opening is that all of that is conveyed to us through a series of images. And what really catches your eye with those images is the foundationally immaculate cinematography of Jessica Lee Gagne. I really hope I pronounced her name correctly. The angles, the wides, the close-ups, the usage of contrasting shadows, these stark, hard lines that are almost brutalist, separating elements of the background and the foreground, these ecclesiastical levels of attention being paid to the minutiae of the frame as you haphazardly rack your brain for fear of missing even a single second that you realize something. I can't stress this enough. There are some beautiful TV shows out there, all of which are shot in different ways. Shows like Succession almost took this sort of mockumentary style of The Office and made it really artistic. Game of Thrones, and a lot of times looked almost as cool and as miraculously expansive and awe-inspiring as Lord of the Rings was. There is no shortage of TV shows that work within the constraints of their budget, that work within the constraints of their stricter time schedules, and come up with these incredible results. And it's not even necessarily that Severance is the most complex show that you've ever seen. It's not that the framing and the ways that they shot it and the camera movements and the lenses and all this fun stuff comes together in this really complex package, but it's because of its simplicity and this understanding of when to move the camera, when to leave it static, when to use this frame here, when to use the golden ratio, when to use blue, when to use orange, when to use a long lens, when to use a short lens. That is so often overlooked in favor of getting a flashier shot. Severance is a breath of fresh air. It is so monumentally beautiful and scary looking. It's unlike anything else I've ever seen, and I would argue it's unlike anything else that anyone has ever seen. No other series and most movies have ever been shot quite like this. It is wholly unique and so utterly whole in its approach that we don't need Mark to exposit to us in order to clarify for us, the audience, his morning routine or his disheveled appearance. But when we do hear him, it isn't even speaking for the first time. It's crying. And from here we watch him solemnly march to what we assume is his job, one foot in front of the other as though we were attending a funeral parade as opposed to the thing that secures his bills. Methodically going through a drawer containing another watch and badge, and he enters the elevator and it moves down slowly, ominously. Mark has changed, dare I say he almost looks happy. Walking through the halls as though he wasn't crying mere minutes ago, he rounds the final corner into a large rectangular room, the center of which is dominated by a series of 4 desks with cubicle-high walls and some old-looking computers that would barely fit in the early 2000s. What the hell just happened? Well, Mark is severed. Now, to the first-time viewer, this is a mystery to us, and even now, in a way, it still sort of is. To be severed in this world that Ben Stiller and Dan Erickson have created is to have a chip implanted in your brain that is activated by some sort of sensor. Now what it does is it separates your memories and your brain functions into different halves, and every time that Mark Scout goes down the elevator and the sensor trips, he is no longer Mark Scout of our world. He is now Mark S, of the world that Lumon has created for him, a world entirely of green carpets, cubicle walls, and stale stark white that seems more indicative of obfuscation than it does sterility. His co-workers join him, Dylan and Irving respectfully. Something out of place is noticed though by everyone. And while it's absent to us, it's clear that something's just not quite right. There are 4 chairs, but only 3 are occupied by the employees. Someone is missing. We're introduced to Miss Cobell, the hard-nosed and mysteriously enigmatic and vocally sterile manager of the severed floor, as well as Mr. Milchick, the complex and verbose assistant to Cobell, the man who interacts with MDR in Cobell's stead. And yes, it is true, someone is missing. Petey. And while he'll be integral to Mark's journey, he is soon replaced by the equally mysterious redhead laying on a conference table in a lonely room. A woman that Mark has to try and introduce to the severed floor of Lumon. See, this opening episode, what it does is what every good episode does. It creates the hook of the story, the mystery at the center of it all. It introduces a reason to keep watching by introducing stakes and missing people and confused people unknowingly interacting with the perpetrators. All in all, the opening of Severance is perfect, and it's just getting started. But the concepts in Severance do seem alien to us, right? I mean, surely the concept of this procedure in the company of Lumon would firmly place it as sci-fi, correct? Here's why I referred to Severance as soft sci-fi. Now that descriptor means a lot to a lot of different people. To the average Joe, I'd argue that soft sci-fi would be more akin to Star Wars or James Bond, but Severance does it in a way that feels extremely off-putting. As you've no doubt noticed in some of the background footage, you can clearly see cell phones, smartphones even. We see headsets, modern apartments, and trendy gas stations. So why is everyone driving around in a shit heap car? Why is macro data refinement using these archaic CRT monitors to find the numbers? Why is the severed floor so brutal, and why are the non-severed floors so modern? Now there is one very solid fan theory as to why this is, but it's a topic that I'm not nearly charismatic enough to do justice, so we'll go with what I personally think. To me, this is meant to give us an eerie, uncomfortable, and total disconnect. When we're in a home, it feels like a proper home. There's modern amenities and art, but when it's time to go to Lumon, it's all so imperfect. The way to get there is this beater car from the 80s or 70s, the severed floors, and intentionally using computers and tech that feel 40 years behind the curve. I mean, imagine that being the only technology you knew, and then all of a sudden you get thrust into a world of flat screen TVs, smartphones, and emails. You would panic. And while I do believe in the theory that I mentioned before, to me it's only important if it comes true, and while I firmly believe that it will, for now I view this stark differentiation of visual intent of showcasing our characters' lack of agency in their own lives and their own quality of it. There's not much reason to do this unless you really distrust your employees and you view them as expendable. I mean, a 30-year-old computer, a 50-year-old car, and terrible green carpets that trap bacteria more efficiently than a fly on shit, it'd be tossed away without a second thought. So what does it say about the people that are being forced to use them and how management feels about them? Now, a big part of what makes Severance so compelling is its relatable characters and how they all effectively act as two different protagonists at any one point. Since they're severed, they have what's referred to as their innie and their outie. The innie is the one working at Lumon, whose earliest memory is white hallways, and the outie whose earliest memory is childhood.
Do you want to see a picture of the kids?
Yeah.
Immediately, there's this intense moral conflict in just the protagonists themselves. Mark is using his innie as a shield for his trauma of losing his wife Gemma in an accident. And while the details aren't known to us just yet, there is something deeply unsettling about the idea of disassociating from your trauma through total separation of self. And yet that self, it's not gone. It's completely rational and thoughtful and intelligent. Mark S., the innie, has his own desires, his own drive, and his own moral compass that differs from his outie. There's immediate distinction that makes these protagonists some of the most compelling ever put to celluloid. And it isn't just Mark. Over the course of season 1, we see bits and pieces of the alternating characters like Dylan, Irving, Helly, Milchek, Cobell, and the other inhabitants of the severed floor. And as they're all grasping with their literal existence, their outies are grappling with the real world and confronting their own traumas. But the innies don't get that luxury. They have to contend with a world that punishes defiance with misunderstanding and placating their concerns in a demeaning and infantilizing process. Helly is the best example of this defiant nature. The mysterious redhead that was on the table as though she would teleport it straight from her bed.
Let me out of here. Hey! Open the door!
She's not copacetic. She doesn't listen to Mark explain it to her. She doesn't go to the MDR room and is like, everything's fine, and she just gets on with her job. No, that isn't mind control. She reacts brashly, violently even, to Mark's questions and the structure of Lumon's work. She doesn't even understand what they do, and while no one really does, she seems to be the only one who's willing to do something about it. She defies the authority placed over her in the form of Milchek, lashing out at any given opportunity vocally and attempting anything she can physically to get out of this bright purgatory. I mean, immediately, we're drawn to Helly. Even if we can't ultimately understand her yet, we can relate to her desire to push back against authoritarianism and her desire to understand an unwinnable situation. But how would you describe an unwinnable situation as anything other than horrifying? See, I think to a lot of people, an unwinnable situation can almost be comforting because there's that knowledge that no matter what you do, something is inevitably going to stop it. So the easiest thing for you to do is to lay down, accept it, and whatever consequences come is what was meant to be. Surely, a lot of people could argue the comfort of that feeling. I would argue the opposite. I'm going to wax poetic here for a second before I get on to the next part of this script. My biggest personal fear, as somebody who was raised Catholic, as somebody who has grown up in a world that's become increasingly more amoral, and we've removed, God in whatever form you want to call him or her, in this grandiose sense of what art really is. Art has become more sterile. It's become less sincere, and it's become more assured of only one answer. There's very little nuance to art anymore. Not entirely. This is not a doom and gloom sentence. To me, my biggest fear is the idea that if there is an afterlife, that I have no agency in what I do. My biggest fear is that no matter what I do in my life, no matter the amount of free will I exert on my own situation, my own circumstances, my own sense of self, that there is ultimately no point to it, because if I'm ended up destined to go to one place, whether that be the afterlife from Buddhism, Catholicism, whatever you want to pick it from, the idea of there being no agency within that decision and no way out, does that not scare the shit out of you? Maybe it should. As the innies wander the halls and project their unknown emotions onto a display screen, gathering data for an unknown purpose for the Egans, the founders of Lumon, they're subjected to a series of situations that are at times disastrous and all of the time terrifying.
I'm afraid you don't mean it.
Excuse me?
Again, please.
Allow me to pose this next section in a hypothetical. If you only knew of the existence of 6 people in your world, you've never seen anyone other than them, how would you react to the sudden appearance of someone new? Not only someone new, but someone who takes part in something you've only heard rumors of as being violent and frightening. I mean, you'd understandably feel scared, unsure, and hoping for stability. And now imagine that as you discover this new person, or rather they discover you begin to branch out and realize that it's not just one person, but rather dozens, possibly hundreds more, all living in the same sheltered existence that you are, never knowing that you existed despite being only a short walk away.
You disapprove?
I do. I do disapprove.
Certainly the handbook forbids taking heart to other employees.
Rat, fuck the handbook. This guy's Owen goddamn D who are duplicitous snakes to a one. It's not safe.
This idea of misdirection and smokescreens that deploy in totality, leaving only a tiny way forward. Through the machinations of Cobell, Milchick, and Lumon, the MDR team only knows a world of restriction and dictatorial commands. There is no negotiation nor clarity. They have to find that themselves. And as they wander the halls of Lumon, sometimes coming across a small room with a man and a bunch of goats, a room entirely dedicated to art preservation that's betraying an entire college of people behind its doors, to the mysterious dark hallway that no one really seems to quite know exists.
Oh. How long have I been?
If you wouldn't mind turning around and heading back in, it would be greatly appreciated.
There's so much mystery to Lumon, and it's like we're discovering it with the characters. But because we don't know what's around the next corner and everything looks so uniform, that when something does jump out at us, or when something bleeds down a hallway, or when the lights are pulsing and following our every move, it's not comforting. And I mean, what else can you do about that other than defy it?
You smug motherfucker. You're not severed. You walk out of here with your memories. You carry them home with you every night.
On the outside world, the horror doesn't stop. Mark Scout, which I'll just refer to as Audi Mark, meets a stranger who claims to have worked at Lumon. Not only did he work there, he's the missing man from MDR, Petey. And according to him, he met someone that found a way to reverse the effects of the Severance procedure, allowing him to remember everything from inside of Lumon. And with the work being so mysterious and so important, he's a wanted man. A wanted man who appears to be dying. The procedure appears to be problematic, unstable, and unsafe. Even when you find a way to escape the halls of Lumon, there's a way to close in on you in the outside world. The grip of the Egans are vice-like, and their reach is shortened only by their ambition. And the depth of their ambition seems bottomless. Now, Petey's arrival in the show spurs an underlying desperation in Audi Mark to try and understand his role at Lumon, albeit more than a little cautiously at first. This all-consuming, suffocating tone of despair, confusion, mystery, and terror builds and builds and builds and builds with each new discovery and each new point of clarity, ultimately coming to what I can only describe as the most brilliant and tense 40 minutes in TV show I've seen since The Wed Wedding and Game of Thrones. We found out prior to the finale that Lumon has the ability to sever the Audis at any point that they want to, a mechanic known as the OTC, or overtime contingency.
What the fuck?
We told you to count to 1,000 and wait outside.
Is that my kid?
End it.
By performing a series of tasks, the company can turn an Audi into an innie at any point they want / feel the need to. Now, this horrifying revelation of realizing just how little agency they have over their own lives spurs a revolt from MDR that culminates in Dylan activating the OTC and giving his friends the chance to get help from the outside world.
Dylan, fuck you, Mr. Milchick!
But when the innies are suddenly thrust into a world brimming with life, they flounder. They ultimately kind of fail. Irving never leaves his apartment, staring around at his belongings in confusion as he tries to make sense of it all until he remembers Bert. Mark is at his sister's house attending a party of some sort and has to come to terms with convincing his relatives that they aren't talking to the Mark that they know. And Helly?
Gabby, this is Helena Egan. My gosh, Helena. So good to finally meet you.
Likewise.
Helly finds out that she's been a deeper part of this since the beginning. She is the thing she's been fighting against. She is the authoritarian keeping her in place. Her Audi, and her, by association, she's an Egan. As their lives are flipped upside down, unable to escape from the suffocation of knowledge, they realize that even if it seems futile, they have to try something. Helly delivers an impassioned speech about how the innies are suffering, terrified for their lives and unsure of their purpose. Irving tries to warn Bert, a man he fell in love with inside of Lumon, and Mark desperately tries to make his sister understand his fears. Now, all of this concluding in what will inevitably go down as one of the greatest final scenes in TV cinematic history.
Listen, we're not happy. We're miserable. They torture us down there. We're prisoners! She's alive!
And if you thought this was the end of the terror, if you thought by them kind of getting out there and setting up this discourse and creating doubt in the public about what happens to severed people, you haven't been paying attention. Season 2 of Severance picks up directly after the events of the Season 1 finale. Mark goes down the elevator, he becomes severed and sprints through the halls in fear for his life. He enters the now familiar room of MDR, but something is wrong. There's other people there, like 3 people that, normally should be there, but Dylan, Irving, and Helly have all been replaced. 3 new faces, loosely resembling the core 3, stare back at Mark in apathy and surprise. Now, as Milchick tries to ingratiate Mark to his new hires, Mark finally decides to grow a pair and stand up to his oppressors.
Hey, did Miss Wong take notes? I can't wait to read her article about it in that newspaper you showed me. What was it called again? The Bullshit Gazette?
Everything that occurs over the course of Season 2 is what can best be summed up in these words: growing, nagging dread.
He's really lonely.
Everything that came to light over the course of Season 1 is brought to bear here. Every character moment, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, no matter how grandiose, is given ample time to fester and grow into something monumental and terrifying. Audi Mark becomes aware of his wife's situation, now having to contend with the reality that Gemma is very much alive. But Gemma isn't really just alive, she's being tested on. All those numbers in Season 1, all that MDR, had a purpose, a dark and disturbing purpose that made me look back on Season 1 with a lot of newfound dread. Dylan finally gets his wish, meeting a part of his Audi's family that ends in tragedy as he becomes the unaware catalyst to his Audi's onset of frustration and mistrust.
If you want to leave, you can. But I think you should stay.
Irving becomes increasingly erratic and distrustful of all that is Lumon, juxtaposed with his Audi's bizarre interactions with Audi Bert. Helly being discovered as not always being severed by Irving, creating an atmosphere of constant distrust and hope that she is who she says she is. And even our antagonists, Milchick, finds himself at the epicenter of growing disrespect at the hands of Lumon. And the inability to control his own destiny.
Eat shit, Mr. Drummond.
There's just so much that happens over the course of these fairly brief 2 seasons, and yet it's damn good. It's so good and scary. And yes, I'm being a lot more vague with this than I was with Invincible, because there is so much mystery, there's so much to uncover that trying to explain it to you is impossible. You need to experience it. But it's here that I like to really get into the weeds of what I believe makes Severance much more akin to horror than to any other genre it gets labeled as. The real horror of this diatribe, the real terror of this essay. What if I told you that Severance isn't sci-fi, it's not fiction, nor is it fantasy, for one very simple fact. Severance is already real.
He said the church's stance is that innies are complete individuals with souls that can be judged separately from their outie.
So an innie can go to heaven.
Mostly outie burns.
When was the last time, in recent memory because of its frequency, did you feel that your boss lied to you about what goes on behind closed doors and how much of what happens on your side of the door is the actual truth? And when you make that discovery, how many of you didn't try to get to the bottom of it? At the sacrifice of your sleep, your work ethic, and your relationships? How many of you have been subjected to a seemingly endless array of battery cleverly disguised as trainings and learnings at the behest of your boss and unable to really do anything about it, as the carrot on the end of the stick was knowing what will eventually end and you'll be rewarded? How many of you have had a personal relationship ruined due to a job? You, yes, you! Have you ever felt like a complete fraud to yourself because of your relationships? Have you ever felt fear at the realization of a new job requirement? You have been discriminated against. You have been taken for granted. You have been deceived. You have been utilized for your body and not your skill set. You have been severed. We all do it. We all find a way to mentally, sometimes even physically, and most certainly emotionally, a way to disconnect and make it through the fucking day. A light at the end of the tunnel, maybe a relationship, a hobby, hell, it may be nothing at all, but it's yours, goddammit, it's yours. You control that part, the part where the clock doesn't drag from a 9 to 5, the part where your phone is blissfully silent and the world seems to turn a little faster as though you can't be spared even a few small hours of quiet. In 1926, the world became introduced to the 8-hour workday, given to us by our gracious founder and loving leader, Henry Ford. The titan of an industry, a company that gave us so much and yet asked for so comparatively little. We should be honored, no, privileged even, to be given such a monumentally gracious allowance of 30 minutes to eat a lunch. I mean, those are 30 minutes that could have been used to build a new part, assemble a new brake pad, or even come up with a new idea of how to improve efficiency and cooperation within your own workspace. Are you not for your fellow man? Do you not achieve such lofty goals with the skills that I, Henry Ford, have graciously granted you the ability to learn and disseminate? Are you not grateful for such an opportunity, for such an undertaking, and for such a magnitude of craftsmanship? Are you not grateful for such an opportunity? For such an undertaking of such magnitude of craftsmanship? Are you not grateful? You know, in the Middle Ages, your average peasant worked 150 to 180 days a year. The rest was leisure, biding time between seasons and holidays. You had your days of hard double-digit hours, certainly. You also had much to look forward to. You went home, you slept, you loved, you ate, you drank, you traveled, you learned, and you wasted when you needed to. You had no phone, no email, no mandate to be available outside of that time. You had no overtime contingency, and yet, don't fucking lie to me, and certainly don't lie to yourself when that phone rings, and believe me, it will, with the last number you'd hope to hear from reminding you of a task mandating the finishing of it by that night. Do you really feel any more free than Dylan? Do you feel any more privileged than the peasants of the Middle Ages? Do you feel any more special than the workers at Ford? No. You don't. And if Severance is anything, it's a warning siren. A stark light illuminating what we've all expected for so very long. We live half a life because when we get to where we have to be rather than where we need to be, everything is a fogged mirror. An imperceptible image hidden behind a thin veneer of our own construction. Me, you watching, all of us here. We're all severed. We disassociate. We go home like Mark Scout. We go home like Dylan. We go home like Irving. We go home and we disconnect. You know, we paint, but the art reminds us of work. We watch the news, but the news reminds us of work. We hang out with our kids, we hang out with our family, and yet they remind us of work. Because at the end of all that, of those blissful 4 to 5 hours you get before you have to go to bed and start the whole thing over again, for those 4 to 5 hours, you feel pretty alive. You feel pretty free. You feel like you have choices, you have agency, you have will, but it's not going to last. And those 4 to 5 hours that, you know, combine to maybe a 15 to 20 over the course of a week, if you're lucky, you know, you get to go home, you get to drink for a little bit, you get to stare out the window, you get to maybe walk, maybe take a nighttime drive, maybe travel somewhere. Yeah, but you don't get that. We don't get that. That's not the way it works. If you really think that we're any better off than going to a building, our brain being switched on and off so that we don't have to remember what it is to go to work for 8 hours, I think you're lying to yourself. And that is fucking terrifying.
I really liked being in the office with you all that day. My life has been 107 hours long. Most of that has been these half-hour sessions. My favorite time was the 8 hours I spent in your department. It's the longest I've ever been awake.
Yeah, there must be something we can do.
Why do you care what happens to me?
Because we're people, not parts of people. Even with what little they gave us, these are our lives. No one gets to just turn you off.